Welcome to the Visualizer for AWS tutorial. If you're familiar with AWS Mobile Hub, but you haven't used Kony Visualizer or are curious how to connect Kony-built apps directly to your AWS services, then this video will help you get the AWS demo application for Visualizer up and running quickly so you can start exploring Visualizer and the AWS Mobile Hub development. In this tutorial, we will review Mobile Hub configuration with our sample app, configure your Visualizer for AWS IDE, and connect the sample app to your Mobile Hub services. So let's get started. I've already created a couple Mobile Hub applications in my console. Today I'm going to focus on the My Sample app you can see here. I've configured 4 services: Cognito, Dynamo, Lambda, and S3. Let's take a look at how each of these services are configured, starting with Cognito. The sample app uses a custom email and password configuration for the identity provider. I used the default settings when I configured my identity provider. Now, when I create my identity provider, it also creates a Cognito user pool. So next, I want to add an additional app to the user pool. Click on the apps. Click the resources in your left-hand nav. Now, click your Cognito user pool. Now I want you to click apps and create new app. You'll need to name this app login.kony.aws test. And it's important that you uncheck the generate client secret. At the moment, Visualizer supports the AIM app secret and app key, but it does not support the client secret generated by the Cognito user pool. I created a user in AIM with the roles I'll need to get the app up and running. Once I've created my user, I created the access key and secret. You'll need to record the key and secret to configure your app. We're going to use it later on. The app identity configuration is now finished. So let's take a look at the Dynamo configuration. I've added 2 tables to my Mobile Hub app. A sample news table that is configured as a default example in Mobile Hub, and the user details table I used to store user information during the authentication process with Cognito. A quick click of the user details shows where I'll store the username and passkey for each user in my app. Now I connected Cognito and my user details together with a few Lambda services that I'll import in our next section. I created 4 Lambda services with my Mobile Hub app. You can see them here. When I created my services, I used the Create New API button. Then I replaced the code with each service created by Mobile Hub with the service code available in GitHub. There are a few points you will need to configure in each of these services, except the Hello World service. Let's start with the Create Identity service. You will need to change your region and your identity pool to the identity pool configured in your Mobile Hub app. If you don't know where to get your identity pool, go to the Resources tab in Mobile Hub and choose the Cognito identity pools. Click the Edit pool and grab the identity pool from there. For the Create User and Validate User, you will need to change the DynamoDB to point to your user tables. You can see the name of your pool from the Resources tab in Mobile Hub. If you open both the Create User and Validate User, you will need to change the user details and Amazon region to match your user details table and the region that your Lambda services are deployed. You don't need to make any changes to the Hello World service. Finally, you will need to configure your S3 bucket. Mobile Hub makes enabling S3 easy with the click of a button. Once your S3 bucket is configured, you will need to add a public directory to your S3 bucket and place a PNG file in that bucket. Our app is going to use this PNG file to display the PNG when selected from the public directory in the sample app. Now we can focus on our mobile app. Let's get our IDE configured. There are a few steps to configure the IDE. Number 1, downloading the SDK. Number 2, importing the SDK into Visualizer. And number 3, adding the SDK to your app so your app can actually use the SDK that you've imported into Visualizer. So I've already opened Visualizer, and now I'm going to configure Visualizer to use the AWS SDK for browsers. Now click the Edit, Manage AWS Service, and Download. This will take you to the AWS JavaScript SDK page. Simply download the SDK. You can use either one, the one you can configure yourself or the standard SDK. Once the SDK is downloaded, unpack the SDK into a directory and use the import function here in the Manage AWS Services section to import the minified version of the SDK, and Visualizer is ready to go. Finally, we need to enable our app to use the SDK. click the wrench over here in the left-hand navigation and check the Enable SDK for this app. This will enable your application to use the AWS SDK. The last step to get our app up and running is to change some of the configuration parameters. Click here in the modules and open up the AWS config module. You'll need to change the parameters within this file to match your Mobile Hub deployment. Also, remember the identity we created earlier in AIM will need the app key and app secret at this point. So I hope you've written those down. If not, go back and generate you an app key and app secret and add them in the appropriate places here. If you need help finding any of this information inside of Mobile Hub, just go to the Resources tab. Now, once this is complete, you can compile and run your sample app. If you've configured everything correctly, your app will be up and running. If you want to see how the app connects to AWS, check out the aws.js module. Thanks for watching this tutorial and have fun creating apps with Visualizer on AWS. For more information and great tutorials on using Visualizer, check out Kony.com. Thank you.